Good evening, Poe fans. We are back with Poe discussions with Carmen and Jeanie. Jeanie, you want to say hi?
I might. Hello.
So we are here tonight with a very special guest, and his name is Stephen Smith. And we are very excited to have him here with us. And we're just going to get right on in this and let him introduce himself, and then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, so my name's Stephen Smith. I'm an actor from the UK, originally from Watford, but I live in London now. But I'm recording this or talking to from Liverpool at the moment. So that's where I'm currently at. But in recent years, I've been touring around a Edgar Allan Poe theatre show, and which has taken various forms over the years. But I'm really enjoying getting my teeth into performing Poe, and it's been a relatively recent fascination with the guy. However, there have been roots ever since my early childhood linking me back to Edgar Allan Poe, which we'll get to in a sec, I guess. But yeah, my show that I'm touring around, and I've taken to the Poe Festival and Poe Museum in America, is called Man Poe. It's a one-man show where I perform 4 Edgar Allan Poe pieces back to back.
Okay, and will you tell everybody what 4 stories, poems that you do?
Yes, so I kick it all off with the Telltale Heart, and then I perform the Pit and the Pendulum, and then there's an interval where I get a bit of a break, and then the Black Cat, and then the Raven finally.
Okay. Oh, that is awesome. Now, in the style that you do them in, I think they're not adaptations. You do them like almost recitation, it's kind of like.
Yeah, that's it was a decision I made, I guess, during the pandemic when I revisited Poe's original texts and stories. I kind of figured that they work pretty much perfectly just as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I was used to throughout my childhood was all certain film adaptations of his work,
Mm-hmm.
which, as you obviously know, deviate quite drastically
Yes.
from the original source material by and large. And yeah, we can chat about that. I have a theory why
Okay.
they deviate so much, but my mission, I suppose, was, yes, like you say, learning them pretty much verbatim and performing them exactly how Poe wrote them down nearly 200 years ago now. So I'd like to think they're faithful adaptations for sure.
Absolutely. And it kind of reminds me of Vincent Price one man show that he did of Poe. Think back in maybe around the late 70s. I can't remember exact date. Have you seen his
Mhm.
version that he
I've
did?
seen some clips on YouTube where he obviously televised verbatim. He televised some stories using the original text, and it's just
Hmm.
him, and it's all, close ups on his face and his incredible
Hmm.
storytelling. Yeah, I believe he did that one about the Sphinx potentially, and the Black
Yes.
Cat and the Pit and the Pendulum are the. Oh,
Yes.
and the Telltale Heart, I believe. I think those are the 4 I remember seeing
I, I
online.
I think you're right because and the Sphinx is one that hardly ever gets read aloud and performed or anything. So when I watched his performance, I thought that was really cool that he added that one just because it was so different. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So
Speaking of,
yeah, go
I'm
ahead,
going to
Jeannie.
ask, speaking of Stephen, what made you choose these 4 particular stories to recitate and to enthrall your audience with? Because I mean, I know they're one of the more popular Edgar Allan Poe's. So was there a reason behind that of like you knew it'd be the most interesting, or did you have a personal choice in these stories?
Yeah, well, I suppose basically my really rewinding the clock now, that the reason why I, as a little kid, you know, at the age of 3 or 4 years old, ever since I can remember, became fascinated with acting and pretending and dressing up and all of that, was because of these the old black and white Universal horror movies, and people like Lon Chaney and Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and it just blew my mind as a little kid that one man could play a multitude of monsters, and that I just couldn't fathom that, especially Lon Chaney, of course, the man of 1,000 faces.
Yeah.
That title alone just pricked up my ears, you know. And there's countless photos of me doing my own makeup and costume and pretending to be all these sorts of different monsters. But in terms of wanting to do acting professionally, I suppose that kind of kicked in my late teens, I suppose. But I'd always been fascinated with pretending and playing and everything. So I suppose, fast forwarding the clock, going on to, you know, the pandemic and stuff, because I mean, during the pandemic, I was late 20s. I forget the actual age, but we all felt somewhat vulnerable and childlike in the pandemic, in a way. Our schedules were taken away from us, and we couldn't really plan anything. And I went headlong into my childhood fascination with Gothic horror, classical literature, and all of that. And created some online Facebook Live shows originally from my home. And the first one that I did was The Telltale Heart. It was because it's a 20-minute long, very intense and awesome monologue. So and takes place in one room, essentially, or at least one house. And so that was just the perfect thing to kind of kick off my online theatre, which has now developed over the years, and I've won several awards for my digital theatre work. But The Telltale Heart was the first one that I ever did. And then a few months later, I did The Black Cat, and that was when things were opening up again, and we did the entire show. It was still an online show, but it was in a Gothic church in London that's now been converted to a theatre called The Space. Yeah, it's this really creepy Gothic, perfect setting for, well, a bit of creepy, like Edgar Allan Poe stuff. And yes. So The Black Cat was a few months after The Telltale Heart. And I suppose I chose The Black Cat because I felt like there's so many locations in The Black Cat, and it travels through all sorts of time periods, unlike The Telltale Heart, which is pretty much takes place over a few days, really.
Yeah.
So The Black Cat just was, and this online show that we did in 2021, it really traveled inside, outside, along the corridors, up the stairs of this cool old church. And my style is one-shot filmmaking, but live streamed at the same time. So it's kind of like a live film. And that was nominated for a Saturday Visitor Award at the Poe Fest. And we won the Best Adaptation category, actually, which was such a awesome event in itself. But before going to America and winning the award for The Black Cat, I then thought, well, I know 2 Edgar Allan Poes. Why not learn another 2 and create an actual in-person theatre show where me, as I may not be the man of 1,000 faces, but I could be the man of 4 faces in one Man Poe, and I filled in the gaps with The Pit and the Pendulum, which I felt was one of the more unique stories of Edgar Allan Poe, and obviously The Raven, which is arguably his most famous piece. But in short, the reason why I've picked these four more than anything else in my mind is because they make amazing first person testimony that can be easily, more easily than others, but they can easily be translated to a person telling a story on stage. Whereas something like The Mask of the Red Death, for example, even though it's a really awesome story, it's a narrator. It's not a character in the story. And then you have something like Fall of the House of Usher, which again is an amazing popular story, but it would mean that I would have to play the narrator, then play another character, you know, there's a few characters in that, whereas the four that I've chosen, the narrator stays the narrator the whole way through, and there's not really any kind of interactions from any other characters. There's a couple of lines from the old man in the Telltale Heart, and of course there's the Raven in the Raven squawking nevermore. But both of those parts, I had just a pre-recorded sound effect for the old man sitting up in the bed going, "Who's there?" and also the Raven going, "Nevermore." You know, they would kind of like be in the sound design. So I somewhat, I basically picked them because I felt they were the best to perform as an actor playing one character.
Yeah.
And especially on a storytelling point of view, you can control yourself the most when you're telling a story, and going back and forth if you're trying to interact with yourself can be daunting to keep it straight, especially if you're trying to, like you said, having the pre-recordings, you have the different sounds, the different vocals that you need to have in order to make believe for the characterization to come across. So and I was reading up on your website and you were talking about how you did the pandemic with the Telltale Heart. I was like, oh man, I wish I had seen that when it first came out, because that would have been just phenomenal. Because what perfect story to fit with the pandemic is the Telltale Heart being trapped in a house, and you're just, because it's like, is it real? Is it not? Is it just in your mind? I mean, that to me would fit perfectly with the time of the pandemic. So I was very excited when I saw that.
There was also a kind of added, somewhat more ominous point at the time, because when I did the Telltale Heart, it was early May of 2020, and that was when we were all kind of in that phase of just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And it seemed at that phase that it was mostly older people that were getting killed by the virus.
That's
so the
true.
fact there's this kind of creepy dude who targets an old man through no reason whatsoever, really, apart from his evil eye, so there was a kind of added element to that, which I didn't really think of in terms of picking I wanted to do the Telltale Heart as a piece of theater maybe 1 or 2 years before the pandemic. Actually, I just never got around to it. But it was a great thing to leap onto during the middle of COVID, because it was already out there, already written, already fantastic. I didn't have to wait for someone to write something for me, and I could just perform it as is, and it's still on YouTube as well. If you type in the Telltale Heart Facebook live show, you'll see the 25-minute long stream that we put out with all its cool effects and everything. And check it out. And it's and bearing in mind, I'm very proud of it, because bearing in mind at the time all I saw online was either very professional recordings of professional theater shows, or really somewhat very much so unimaginative Zoom shows, which just bored the hell out of me, really. So I'm very pleased that I found a really cool way of doing a digital theater show, and it's snowballed over the years to the effect that I'm now in Liverpool, back at my old drama school, teaching the acting students how to create digital theatre with their own mobile phones and stuff. So it's really come full circles. But
That's amazing.
I've got Edgar Allan Poe to thank,
Yes.
so I'm super grateful for the guy, really.
Oh, I agree. And, I'm a teacher currently. I teach freshman English, and Jeanie is a retired teacher, and I've taught history as well, but Jeanie has taught all the subjects. And so when we hear of people really working with students of any ages, and especially like, adding in that Poe atmosphere, it's like, yay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is
Totally.
amazing. So where, you said that from the time you were around 3 or 4, you really kind of, I guess, knew you wanted to be an actor. So when did, Universal Monsters were there for you? When did Poe come into your life? Like, about how old were you?
Well, it must have been around about the same age, 3, 4, 5, round about then. I was building up my VHS collection of all the Universal
Mhm.
horror films, and obviously there's the Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff collabs in
Yes.
1934 and
Mhm.
1935, the Black Cat and then the Raven.
Raven,
And
yeah.
the Raven especially is obviously more not certainly nothing to do really with the original poem, but
Mhm.
certainly more Poe centric. The Black Cat, I mean, I don't know how they can really say inspired by Poe with that 1934
Yeah.
film, but and obviously there was also the Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is 1932. Not a very it was all right. It was an okay film, but
Yeah.
it wasn't one that I really liked when I was younger. And so those 3 films from the Universal era, anyway, were really my first insight into Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay.
However, I feel like, because I remember reading at the time, a lot of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Bram
Mhm.
Stoker's Dracula, but I can't really remember. I must have tried to read some Edgar Allan Poe, but maybe because it was so, I just can't remember if I ever really bothered at the time to read him.
Okay.
I can't remember, but then of course there were the Vincent Price films as well that I grew to love. But
Mhm.
again, I can't remember if I ever at that age went into the original source material.
Mhm.
So it was such a surprise during the pandemic when I discovered how unlike the originals they were. So that was my first introduction.
Gotcha.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, and you said you had a theory of why they are adapted out of the stories and things. We're definitely interested to hear what your take is of that, because we've seen all the ones you've mentioned and like the Vincent Price, Roger Corman films. Love all of them, but yes, they do, move away a little bit from Poe.
Yeah, well, I suppose because I feel like during the last 10 years as well, I must have seen stage adaptations of some of his stuff, and I noticed that adaptations, well, film adaptations seem to be any adaptations seem to do one of 2 things in my mind. They either take a story like The Telltale Heart, which is a 20-minute long story when you read it out loud, and they turn that into a feature length film or even a fringe length theater show, which is still an hour plus. And
Mhm.
obviously with the original story being so on purposefully intense and short, and something that you can really ramp up the tension in such a short space of time to leave a very powerful effect on a reader.
Mhm.
When you take the story like that, whether it's the Telltale Heart, the Pendulum, or the Black Cat, whatever, and you try and elongate it to to an hour and a half, you just have to add in so much filler that completely takes away the original intensity of the original. So they either make something that is meant to be short and intense really long and somewhat boring and elaborate, or they do some kind of mega mix of all of his favorites, all the best bits and stuff. And sometimes that really works. Like I really enjoyed The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix. I really thought that they kind of crammed in, well, it's like it must be 10 plus stories of his and poems, but they created a universe that you could kind of believe in and not really I mean, the main point of that series, why I liked it, is that you didn't have to know his stories inside out to get it. You could still enjoy the series and not know any Poe. But when I've seen Edgar Allan Poe performed on stage, like in an Edgar Allan Poe musical or something, you know, I don't. Sometimes it works, but I find that most of the time when they do this mega mix thing, you have to really know the stories like the back of your hand to understand what's going on. And anyone who doesn't know these stories kind of turn up to this potentially their first outing of Edgar Allan Poe and leave completely alienated by the guy, you know, and by what the people are trying to do, because you don't know what they're mega mixing. So that's why I was really keen on honoring the original texts and in their original form, and not feeling like I should stretch them out or add characters or anything. So that's my theory of why adaptations can be so not as effective as the originals. Plus I don't think many people are crazy enough as me to learn 13,000 words of verbatim text, you know. So yeah.
That's
a
a
beast.
lot of words, yes, and very impressive. And I think that is a spot on theory, because you know, Poe wrote them as short stories. You know, he only has the one novel, and he meant for you to be able to sit down within probably an hour time, you know, hours time, based on how fast you read or whatever, and almost like a sitcom or an hour-long drama for TV. So, you know, it's like you lose your, you know, attention span if it is too long, and like you said, too drawn out.
Well, and also I'm going to add in here where you could ruin the intent of what the author actually wants from the story for the reader if you embellish too much. I remember when I was first introduced to Shakespeare, when you are in a classroom and you have a teacher who's trying to teach you about Shakespeare, and you're trying to read a play as an actual story or something, you're not really experiencing what, in my opinion, it was meant for. Because it's like with Poe, you're meant to read it and you're meant to be immersed in it. And Shakespeare, you're meant to experience it as you're seeing it as a drama unfold by different characters. And that's the way it was meant to be. And so what you were saying, Stephen, is perfect, spot on. That we've started watching The Fall of House Usher. We've only got like 3 episodes in, but we understand
we're hyper focused on it, trying to catch all the things.
We're watching it from these fanatics of the Poe people who like to pull and see what all Poe they've put in there and where it's at. But from a layman's type of point of view, you can watch it and enjoy it without actually having to know Poe. So I think that's one of the successes of it, and they've done a great job storytelling in that point of view. So when you are teaching this, you said you're now teaching at your old alma mater, right? So and you're teaching this digital. Are you teaching it like from a Facebook Live point of view, or from just kind of one-man show point of view, or how are you conducting that to get them to understand that you may be doing it electronically, but you still got to stay true to the storytelling? I guess is what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
well, what I'm currently doing essentially is so I'm doing digital heightened text with the BA in acting students at the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, which is where I trained from 2014 to 2017. I graduated back then. But basically what I'm trying to do, we're actually working on the text of Duchess of Malfi, but they've seen my Edgar Allan Poe stuff, and the thing is with this particular style, it is, even though it's filmic storytelling, but it is essentially a live theatre show, because you're doing it all in one singular take, which might be a 70-minute long take, but streaming it live to an audience to enjoy remotely, rather than it being a live streamed a kind of bonus that you get to see a theatre show live streamed, but you really know that you'd be having a greater time watching the actual in-person show, and you're just audience B. But my shows are meant for an at-home experience. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the using the text and everything, whether it be Poe or Duchess of Malfi or Shakespeare, it really is a challenge for certainly certain screen actors to really get that juicy language and really ping it out as if it is for a theatre 600 seat large, even though the camera's right there. You kind of need that big heightened acting style. And I'm a very physical actor as well. I trained with a lot of doing a lot of Stephen Burkoff work, and I've toured a lot of his work around the world, as well as performing Poe in various countries and to various schools now. I'm glad to say I'm around the UK. I'm performing a lot of Edgar Allan Poe's work now for college students, and Man Poe, the show that I do, I always say, even though it is a bit gruesome here and there, I'd say it's for 12 and above, because you only really all the horrible stuff is just referenced, really, and it's up to your imagination to fill in the gaps, which is arguably more frightening actually than seeing some blood and but
yeah, it definitely can be. Well, what is like the reaction to, like, for people that are in England or, other places, abroad, to Poe? Because, in America, he is, celebrated author. I can't, I can honestly say I've never had anybody say I hate Poe. Like, everybody embraces something that he has written here in America. And so it just, I don't know, it would be fascinating to hear, how do people in England like approach Poe, or was he taught in school, when you were in, like, I'm not exactly sure what school was called, like a grammar school or something like that, growing up. Yeah. What'd you say, Jeannie?
Primary.
Yeah, primary school. So, and now as you're doing your show and things, it's just, I don't know, that kind of thing is very fascinating.
Yeah, well, I know for a fact that on the English literature syllabus, there is a whole module on the Gothic, because I did English literature back in like college level and a bit before and everything. You obviously do it. It's a compulsory subject you do all the way up to your high school years, but then you can choose to do it at college level, and I chose to do it. And in that in those 2 years, there was definitely a module on the Gothic. But I remember for my Gothic literature, I didn't do any Poe. I did Jane Eyre. That was our main one. So it's obviously, there's so many Gothic writers out there.
Yes.
And it's quite rare, I would say, compared to the US, for Poe to be picked as one of the one of the writers they use.
Okay.
But it's not completely. I mean, I do know a few schools that teach him, and I'm sure there are lots out there. But my personal school career, I never really touched on the guy at all throughout my English literature.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
But it's certainly in the zeitgeist for sure.
Yeah. So how do the audiences, in England and other places in Europe and things that you're performing, but how do the audience like take to Poe when you're performing?
Yeah, it's certainly it's great that you mentioned Shakespeare, because I think it's very similar to Shakespeare in the sense that to really get the writing, you need to see it really embodied and acted
Mhm.
out. And I think you can see it in Poe's writing, and especially the four that I've picked to perform. Is he really wants to honor his parents, who are
Yeah.
both actors as far as I'm aware.
Mhm.
And he creates some fantastic characters. And I kind of pride myself in the way that I perform One Man Poe, because I perform each of the characters as four very distinctly different characters with different, somewhat different accents and makeup changes in between and costume changes. And but I don't play. My thing isn't playing Edgar Allan Poe himself. I don't do that. I play his characters.
Mhm.
So I feel like just the audiences really respect the fact that these four very different stories are well, a lot of the audience are quite surprised sometimes, who don't know Edgar Allan Poe, that he is an American author. Actually, I think
Okay.
because of the language that I use, and I don't put on an American accent. So I suppose his archaic language is quite suited for that kind of English stage actor. I mean, when I do the Raven, I really channel my inner Ian McKellen for that one, that's for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, they really look at him like the American Shakespeare, I would say. A nice kind of way to put it.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the language that, yes, Poe is an American author, and many people don't understand that or get that because there's like, we've always talked about the settings that, Murders in the Rue Morgue, French. He always puts
Mm.
a, European spin on his story settings.
Many of
But
yeah.
yeah, but I think also in the same actual in the early years of when during his lifetime, there was still a lot of English, the language of the British being spoken
Mhm.
when he was
Mm.
growing up, and so he was probably getting inundated still, and he still had that connection. So I think that's a lot because he lived in London for 3 years, I think it was, during his youth.
Mhm.
Mm.
And so I think maybe he was coming across in his writing with a little bit of that background. And you can, and I think that's why people don't really think of Edgar Allan Poe being an American author because he doesn't really portray that, in my opinion. It's like
Yeah.
Charles Dickens. Everybody, you know, thinking about Charles Dickens being a British author, and we're all going, "What? Really? Yeah, I guess." But
Yeah.
I guess we've seen his adaptations and more of the American versions of A Christmas Carol and stuff. So I've
Mhm.
always thought of Charles Dickens more of American than I have Edgar Allan Poe. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah,
That's
that is
interesting.
weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting as well. Well, I was gonna say, Jeannie, you mentioned that yes, Poe did live in England for a short time. Are there any kind of like places that are like a historical reference to him, or because I know I forget the name of the school that he went to over there. Just I was just curious.
Yes. Now not that I've ever been there, but I believe Stoke Newington is the area in London that he used to live, and I'm pretty sure there is a statue of him there, or at least a little bust
Oh, yeah.
somewhere.
Okay.
It was unveiled maybe 10 years ago. And I'm actually in talks with there's the guy who looks after like the Vincent Price estate and everything.
Mhm.
He came and saw One Man Poe when I was doing it in North London, and he's hoping to, he and I are hoping to collaborate and do some sort of, in the next few years, some sort of UK based Poe festival or performance
Okay.
festival, or something to honor his time in the UK for sure. Because it's nice to see him kind of popping back into popularity on Netflix and everything, like with Wednesday and
Yes.
All of the House of Usher and the Christian Bale movie. It's nice to see him kind of being still kept in the forefront of Gothic literature and everything. It's really cool to
Yeah.
see.
It definitely is. Well, you need to keep us posted on, when you're going to do that, because I know my husband and I have not traveled abroad at all. We've only been, Mexico and Canada, just because they're attached
Sure.
with North America. And so we definitely are wanting to come over to England and Ireland, and so we would definitely try to make it over there for that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he's just waiting for this church to be
Okay.
refurbished in Stoke Newington, and I think he's pretty hell bent on it taking place there.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, hopefully, I mean, he was saying like he might pay a visit to the Poe Festival next year and everything,
Okay.
so you might be able to meet him in person. If
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll be there next year. I mean, I know I'll be good. You can't keep me away from Poe Festival for the next few years
Oh
anyway.
yeah.
Especially
It's
next year,
yeah.
the big one in 175.
Yes, it is, and it's a great festival. It has grown so much. My husband and I have been every year since it started, and just absolutely love it and love being a vendor there. So yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. Well, Jeannie, what other questions do you have?
Well, I was kind of curious that you're okay. Forgive me if I mispronounce it. Freedom? Is that the name of
Yeah.
is it a production type company, or is it like a troupe, or what exactly?
It started off as a troupe of three of us, but pretty much in the last few years, it's just been a bit of a one-man band situation. Me doing everything, sometimes even directing my own solo shows.
Oh
So
wow,
it's and I do my own marketing.
that's
Oh,
a
very
lot of
cool.
work.
Yeah. But I was kind of curious about it that with the three of you, I was reading a little bit about the biographies of everybody and what you do. Did you all actually attend classes, or is that how you guys met? I'm pretty sure I thought that's how I remembered it.
Yes.
Are they doing their own kind of one man shows or that kind of thing, or anything? I kind of just want to know what you have planned, I guess, for the future of Freedom. Let's
Yeah.
put it that
Okay.
way.
Well. So I'm gonna do the One Man Poe. I'm certainly doing at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival next summer.
Mm.
I'm because it's a 2.5 hour show. I'm going to have to alternate the part one and part two over the month of the festival. But that's certainly what I'm doing in August. In January, I'm producing two all-female five-handed plays back to back in a London theatre. The first play is a play that I produced at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival this year just gone, called Paved with Golden Ashes, and that's a play about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of New York City, 1911.
Oh, yes.
Um, and then the second all-female five-handed play as a double bill to that is a play called Fire Embers Ash, written by another friend of mine who's written this amazing play about the first all-female aviation bombardier team in World War II, which were made up of Russian and Ukrainian women pilots. So that's the big project that I'm kind of working on in January. But besides that, I mean, the other two guys who set up Freedom Theatre with me are kind of doing their own freelance stuff. I think not many people have the and this is what they've told me themselves, have the headspace to kind of produce their own work. I mean, I'm an actor that I'm lucky to say I've been very busy over the last couple of years and haven't needed any kind of bar job or waitering job to sustain my freelance life. But I'm a bit of an anomaly in the sense that I kind of produce my own work, do all my own marketing, act it all, and direct myself, create the sound design, and it's a bit of I'm a bit of a crazy do it all myself kind of person. And because of that, I've now got a good old repertoire of solo shows that I can take to schools, take to different countries. I mean, One Man Poe, I've performed, I think, in 4 different countries now. Malaysia, Dubai, America, well, Scotland and England, if you can. Yeah. So the UK. So yeah. So and it's going to grow as well. It's unlike a lot of the other solo shows that I do. I don't have to pay rights to do One Man Poe because Edgar Allan Poe's he's dead. He's so dead, and
Copyrights now.
Public domain.
Public domain.
Copyright, so. Yeah, I'm not the only one cashing in on his work, I'd say, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but no, I mean, but at the same time, it's certainly been, I would say, One Man Poe has been my greatest creation because it really is just honing in on what makes me an absolute weirdo as an artist. My fascination for all the macabre and horrible stuff from my childhood. I'm just being a big kid again. And it's funny how as soon as you hone in on what really is in your core as an artist, like, so you create your best work. So I'm really enjoying seeing it snowball. And I'm very proud of myself for staging the Pit and the Pendulum, especially because I don't think it wouldn't leap to your mind as a perfect one to put on stage because, you know, when I do it, there's no pit, there's no pendulum. It's all very much imagined. It's all to do with the imagination. But I think I mean, when I performed it at the Poe Festival a couple of years ago now, it got such a great reaction from all of these wonderful wacky Poe fans that I can't tell you how affirming it was to be welcomed for the first time by all you Americans over there, like welcoming this hasty British dude doing Edgar Allan Poe and not your own accent and everything. But you, like, everyone just was so kind and lovely and appreciative of what I could offer. And I'm fully game in terms of returning and expanding. I think and also this year just gone, so I came 2022 was the first year, and then this year just gone, I not only did some tent performances in a whole tent by myself at the Poe Fest, but then I hitched a ride with the Poe Museum guys and went to Richmond, Virginia, and performed, and you know, not only performed at the Poe Museum, but saw all of the awesome stuff that they have there, and I mean, wow, what an honor to see all of that and to really get to know the man himself way more than I ever could from just reading his work. That was so special. And also performing to some local schools from Richmond. It was a group of high schoolers, and, you know, maybe 16, 17 years old, and they were kind of acting all cool at the start of the performance and kind of somewhat scoffing here and there, but by the end of the show they were kind of dead silent, jaws on the floor, wide-eyed, and I really got their attention. And I think what a fantastic way to get introduced to some Poe, you know, just to hear it and see it embodied live. I think like you say, Jeanie, you know, how can you understand Shakespeare without really seeing it performed and feeling it and everything, you know? Same with Poe, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you because, like you
Yes.
said, his gothic horror, his macabre, everything, you know, it attracts the weirdos like us.
Yes. Yes. We're
But
definitely weirdos.
yeah, we're weirdos. We love it, you know, and it's very much that type that you have to dig deep for some people before they can get it because they don't want to read it, they don't want to understand it, especially if you're a teacher and you're trying to get them to read and to want to do something. But for you to offer that they can see it, they can feel it, they can be a part of it, I think that's really good for not only Poe and, you know, even him being dead, it's great for his works that you're reliving, or, you know, not reliving, but, you know, reanimating him
Yeah.
in
Mhm,
some
mhm.
certain way. And for people to see that who don't have that connection or don't already have that love for him,
Mhm.
in my soul as a teacher, I appreciate that
Yes.
you're bringing that to them and to anyone, whether what, no matter the age. And I'm a very proud supporter of storytelling because I actually am a storyteller too, but I haven't done it for years. Because teaching got in the way. But but anyway, so we appreciate you and your one man Poe. You know, even
Yes.
though you have become a one man show, being the producer, the director, the actor, the, you know, the only thing you're not doing is writing your own scripts.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
and I'm
that
not a
is
writer, so you know that makes sense.
yeah.
But
Hmm.
my sound designer, Joseph Fury, and I've had help from my friend Django Holder. The sound design is because I can perform one man Poe, I think, with just one candle and or there's another version where you have, you know, 80 to 100 lighting cues and everything. But
Mhm.
I, you know, in terms of lighting, it's very adaptive.
Yeah.
But the sound design and the music and all of the sound effects that aid the story are very important, especially with the Pit and the Pendulum. I don't see I can't really fathom a version of the play where I can't when if I didn't have a working speaker where I could play all the amazing sounds that we've come up with for the show. So that in a sense is adapting it, you know, how we've adapted it for stage by
Hmm.
creating a whole soundscape of um effects to go with it, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I can definitely see where that would enhance and be adaptable depending on what venue you're at and your audience and things like that. I know, kind of going back to what we were talking about with seeing it and seeing things performed live and things like that. As a teacher, I always tell my students poetry and plays are meant to be read out loud and performed. And I try to hook my students also with songs, and we read the lyrics, and I won't tell them, I'll pull out some old songs, and they're like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And I'm like, "Yeah, did you know it was this rock band from the 80s or the 70s?" And they're like, "What?" And so, and then when we, in the third 9 weeks, we do read Annabelle Lee, then they get it. And, you know, I don't get buy-in from everybody, but I get more buy-in than if I just said, "We're going to read this poem and talk about it." And so, it's keeping Poe alive that way. It's easy because they really do love him. They really do. The younger generation.
Yeah, yeah. And you can see why. I mean, the great thing about his work, especially his horrible stuff, is usually it's about the kind of human capacity for bad good people to do bad things, you know.
Yeah.
And I think we've all got a mind that is capable of some horrible stuff if certain things and people are pushed in certain directions. We're all very capable to go down that way. And so I think that's the true, like, interesting aspect of his horror stuff, is it's really the horror of the human psyche, which is interesting, rather than some monsters or supernatural stuff, which I've never been much of a sci-fi person. I've always enjoyed real people and real stories, and I do feel like, even though The Pit and the Pendulum is a so historically inaccurate, but it's a fantastic story to put alongside the other three, because it's so different.
It is. And go ahead.
But yeah, well, The Pit and the Pendulum is the one and only out of the four that I have actually cut. The others I've kept pretty much verbatim, but there's just so much of The Pit and the Pendulum that just can't translate well to stage. And I still feel like the way when I perform it, I still feel like it could be cut a little bit more. So I'm working on that. I'm working to get it down to maybe a 35-minute long story instead of a 40-minute long story. But uncut, it would probably be about 50 minutes, I'd say. So I've cut quite a bit of it.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. We have our we call it our unbook club that we do on Zoom once a month. And a few months ago, we read Pit and the Pendulum, and everybody was very excited when we announced that was going to be our next month. And it was, I think, wasn't it early? It was early summer, I think, Jeannie, when we read that.
Yeah, I think it was June.
It's one of those, it's a great story, and it gets overlooked sometimes, because I know in the United States, it's not necessarily in school curriculum. Some of the other ones are more popular for teachers to teach. And so I think people forget about that one sometimes, and it's so good.
Yeah, it's got some tricky bits in it in terms of performing it, for sure. Like there's this whole section at the start where he doesn't really know whether he's alive or conscious or anything, and obviously if you're doing that on stage, you can only lie down on the floor for so long saying, oh, I don't know where I am. Oh, is that a heartbeat? Oh, is that a flutter of my heart? And all of that is, someone to be watching saying, you're fine, mate, you're lying on the floor, you're all right, you're alive.
Yeah, draw a chalk outline and get on with it. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Get on with it. Yeah, that could be mundane to watch the whole time.
Yes.
It's like those really melodramatic death scenes that you see in some of the corniest horror movies.
Yes.
Where they're just laying there going, oh. You're like, really?
Well, there's a
Take a breath
theory.
or not?
There's a theory of The Pit and the Pendulum, you guys probably know, but one that it's hard to translate this to my stage performance, but I do actually feel like, because it's so fantastical what actually happens to him after the trial with the judges, I'm actually thinking that one version of looking at the story is a bit allegorical, in the sense that he is sentenced to death and he does die pretty much instantaneously after that trial with the judges. And then it's almost like a kind of purgatory, a series of tasks from just beyond the grave to kind of get to that salvation at the end, and where the cell is liberated, and he's saved, as it were. And I really feel like that's one quite plausible way of looking at the story, that's a kind of allegorical thing about the afterlife, maybe. Yeah.
We discussed that when we were talking about it in our unbook club. We actually made mention of something about with Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
About him, being dead, and then he's experiencing the different levels of purgatory and all that during the Pit and the Pendulum and all that. So yeah, I mean, it could be allegorical, but it you know, because that's one of the things that we love about Poe is he leaves it up to the reader a lot to interpret how they want to be, you know, because if you're truly a guilty person, you'll want to experience you know, all that remorse and then regret. And then if you are not that type of person, then yeah, you'll have a very quick, painless death and you'll be done with it and go on.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
Yeah, and the way I interpreted the Raven as well was and a few people have said, oh, I've never seen the Raven performed as an old man before, but I've always, whenever I've read the Raven, I've always just pictured or heard like I said before, a somewhat Ian McKellen kind of gravitas to it all.
yep.
And the way in the show, the way I subtly, well, maybe not so subtly, but when the way I link, because they're all obviously standalone stories, but the way I link the Telltale Heart, the first story, and the Raven, the last story, is simply by putting in a pale eye as the narrator of the Raven. So my way of linking the two is that the old man that gets murdered in the Telltale Heart is in fact the narrator of the Raven. But maybe a year or two before he goes completely doolally and needs to hire the help to change his nappy and all of that. But it turns out this help decides to kill him because of his horrible eye.
Yeah.
So it makes it all more sadder, I think. When watching the Raven in One Man Poe, if you kind of make that link that, oh, this is the old man that gets smothered to death in the Telltale Heart and chopped up for no reason and sits up in his bed listening to just a creak of the floorboard, just thinking, you know, it makes it all the more sadder.
Yeah.
Bless him.
Oh yeah.
Poor
Yeah.
guy.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be the one that finally gets him in the Telltale Heart is actually the Raven plucking out that eyeball because, like, really, I'm going to take that. Thank you.
I guess there's also one actually an important thing, I suppose, personally, why I got really into Poe during the pandemic was, well, 2020 was the first of January 2020 was the last time I was drunk. And I had been spiraling deeply into like some absolute holes of alcoholism and drug abuse in 2019 especially. But since the start of 2020 I've been sober. But it was a bit of a blessing really having the pandemic kind of come along and all of those social events being taken away from us, and those social events, weddings, parties and all of that would have been just enough temptation for me to try or reward myself with a drink or 3 or 10 for being so good for 4 months straight. But because we had none of them, I was able to actually get clean. But delving into Poe and his terrible alcohol problem, it was a kind of a bit of a sign, I think, to keep it up, and not drink anymore. So I think that was a kind of almost a little sign from whatever, maybe Poe himself, like to say, keep it up, dude. Like don't go back to the bottle.
Yeah.
Because I never gave up because I thought it was bad for me. I gave up because I just was spending every penny I had on alcohol and drugs. So so I gave, and then only after giving up, after a few months of not having any, I started to feel so much better in all areas of my life, and then did research into alcohol especially, which I think is actually the worst drug out there. And for not only for yourself but for society, especially. So yeah, I kind of I took the Black Cat as a kind of way to really channel my inner alcoholic, and it's a very interesting story because obviously it's similar to the Telltale Heart in the sense of, you know, it kind of starts and ends in the same place, but all the way through the middle he's trying to justify his actions by saying that he's an alcoholic. Yeah. So yeah, that's another kind of personal reason why yeah, why I'm so keen to kind of work on Poe, I guess.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, Poe became your sponsor from his afterlife, so that was good.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, if you look at anyone that could truly be the poster child for the the macabre and you know, the terrible life choices and the terrible life that you may lead, it would, you know, it would definitely be Poe, because he had to go through many deaths, many heartaches, his own alcoholism. There's even been some supposition that he was suffering from cancer, brain cancer, that kind of twitched, you know,
Mhm.
changed him there towards the end. Also, he might have had a touch of other diseases along the way.
Mhm.
So, you know, he's like truly the epitome of, oh, the horrible tragic story. Not just what
Yeah.
he wrote, but his life in general. So, but congratulations, Stephen. I'm very
Yes.
proud, you know, for
Absolutely.
having that. But, you know, because that's very hard
Yeah.
to face,
Oh,
because, and
thank
I
you.
agree with you, alcohol is probably the worst for society and for personally of anything. So,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
you know, proud that you took that step, and
Mhm.
glad that Poe made a difference there. So,
Yes.
or you're
Yeah,
making a
big
difference with
difference.
Poe.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I really he came into my life at a very poignant place, and I'm really honoring his work because of that.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a real nice turning point for me.
Perfect. Well,
That's wonderful.
yeah. Thank you for
Really is.
sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, because I think that that type of thing, sharing, also helps other people work through
Right.
their own things. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, and as we
absolutely.
discussed, people are drawn to Poe for different reasons, for different things that maybe they
Mhm.
touch upon in their own lives. And being a Poe fanatic, I have my own reasons of choosing Poe, and so
Yeah.
it's good to know that Poe is for everybody. That's what we
Yeah.
keep trying to tell. He's for everybody. You just have to find where he fits.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
Well, one question we always ask it
mhm.
to everybody that we talk to, what is your favorite Poe story or poem?
Oh,
Yeah.
um, I think I'll have to go with the Black Cat, and that is my favorite. I think for many different reasons, but I think it's the one that uh I can really get my teeth into as an actor, especially,
Mhm.
and because I can confidently do that whole thing just sitting down chatting kind of thing. Whereas I feel like I kind of need to put in a bit of a show for the rest of them, almost like a, you know, I need to yeah, but the Black Cat is literally just such wonderful writing to get into character with. Yeah, the Black Cat,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites, and you know, I hate that the cat does die, and you know he does come back, but yeah, it,
Mm.
it's
Oh
such a
yeah, and
good story.
I should mention myself. Like I've had cats all of my life.
Yeah,
I'm such a cat person.
yeah,
I love cats. So it's not because I hate cats that I love
right.
the Black Cats.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
I know, I know.
but just to clarify, you know,
I know.
yeah, fantastic
Jeannie,
story.
Jeannie and I both have cats, and I actually have.
Yeah.
Well, he was running around here a few minutes ago, but I actually have a black cat named Poe, and so he makes an appearance on here once every blue moon. But he's kind of camera shy, so he wiggles and everything else.
Yeah, I think if we took a poll, it'd be interesting how many people that are Poe fans that actually have cats or are
Yeah.
cat people.
Mm.
Because
I,
Mhm.
it seems to be
yes.
another kind of data set that we all fit into. We're cat people.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting.
that works.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or just tell us about shows coming up? You're going to be our Gothic guest in our newsletter, so we will share out all of that information as well. But anything else you'd like to tell the Poe fans out there?
Oh, well, I mean, look out for One Man Poe or coming to hopefully a theatre near you. I mean, if you
Yeah.
if you're if you'd like to go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival or know anyone who does, please ask them to look out for One Man Poe. I'll be there doing it the whole month. Not sure exactly where my venue is, but it's on the
Okay.
card. So that would certainly be amazing if we could just spread the word about One Man Poe. That would be
Absolutely.
fantastic. But also thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor to geek out a little bit with you
Yeah.
guys. So
Yeah.
yeah, and what perfect people to geek out with. So thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on and talking with us. This has been a wonderful Sunday afternoon, and
Yeah.
here in our neck of the woods, we're right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. It's been a very dreary Poe-esque day, so it's perfect time to talk about Poe. So,
Exactly.
all right. Well, thank you again, Jeanie. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready? We
I'm
are.
ready. Are
Poe
Poe
out.
out.